a strong background like you've got, it sounds like you've been in quite a few industries. How does one demonstrate and pivot into different industries while maintaining a leadership position?
Horrible question to ask somebody on the fly.
It's a big thing, which is...
It is, and it's something I think a lot of people struggle with. What I would tend to say is this, that at a level, most businesses are actually incredibly similar. Businesses fundamentally...
Welcome to the podcast, Richard. It's great to have you here, and I would like to delve into your current role at InQuik as a general manager. So please tell us about what you do.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come along and have a chat with you. And it's always good to talk to people, and I keep telling everybody in our organisation that that's the foundation of what we do, is first of all building a relationship with people and talking to them. Without that, we actually don't do anything with the same as any other business. I suppose what I do here is, at the minute, we're building an international brand. We've already branched out into the US market. We have already product into the Pacific Islands with the Solomon Islands. We're looking heavily at other markets within that. So we're looking at the geographical spread of the business, and we're also looking at the product portfolio diversity of the business. That's something we're quite heavily involved in at the moment, and is providing a lot of traction for the business moving forward.
Awesome. International as such. I mean, how old's the company itself?
InQuik was started around about 8 years ago. Very much a family affair. Bruce, the inventor, came up with a concept of how to construct rather than the product itself. And it's an ingenious system that basically is self-supporting, puts the bridge or the structure into place, and essentially allows you just to pour concrete into that without any temporary formwork, no support structures, anything like that. So for rapid construction, and that's how we're branding it now, accelerated construction, which is, it's right on point with what we do. The entire system lends itself to multiple different sort of scenarios. You look at the defense systems, you look at structures there, you look at multi-story systems, we can adapt it for, car parks, things like that. So, the diversity is what we're really concentrating on at the moment, and the geographical spread of the business.
Well, with the state of the construction industry in Australia at the moment, I literally posted a scary statistic on my LinkedIn the other day that 3,000 builders in the last year, I can't remember which institution released this data, but 3,000 builders in the last year actually went bust. So, and it's generally labour shortage, materials, and if you can find an efficient way to avoid delays, I think you're onto a winner.
Yeah, look, that's at the core of what we do. We've taken those issues away from site. We do all reinforcing cage work in a controlled factory environment up in Newcastle, just north of Newcastle and Heatherbrae.
Yeah.
So all that's carried out there. Essentially, it's the skilled element of site has been removed and put into the safe confines of a factory. We ship that out to the site, and all that is really needed is the abutments and headstocks or whatever set into place, and the decks set on top. If it was a bridge, if it was a structure, it's exactly the same. You talk about the construction industry and the labour shortages and things like that. What our accelerated construction products actually do is remove the need for so much labour on site, and more importantly, that highly skilled labour of FRP and if you're in the industry, form, reinforce and pour. We really only need somebody who can pour a driveway and finish the top, the surface finish on it. That's really the skill level in constructing one of our bridges. The engineering has been taken back a step and engineered into the product before it even arrives on site. So you've got that quality assurance. It's not built on site, it's engineered in a factory.
Wow.
So I have to say, it's something that, within the construction industry, you heard about it years ago, and one of the big advocates for it was Lang O'Rourke. Many, many years ago, they were very much in the whole sort of psyche of their business was kind of built around prefabrication. And I think through the 80s and 90s, prefabrication got quite a, not a bad name, but a throwaway sort of characteristic to it. You look at old Nissen huts that were built all over the UK, that were prefabricated, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you see sheds and things like that all over the UK that are like that. And what InQuik and the business here really did was professionalize that, put it into a really well-engineered product that lent itself to other sectors within the construction market. I think that's, the best way of putting it.
And I think it's super important, like we said, with the state of the construction industry at the moment and infrastructure, that we have innovation to move forward, because everyone always speaks about there's no point being stuck in your ways or anything like that. We need to move forward. And how do we move forward is we innovate and then make sure that it delivers on what it says it's going to do as well, to build that trust with, your clients, like, say, for example, let's just use Lang O'Rourke. Yeah. So.
Oh, totally. And that's exactly what the business did. And I don't take any credit for that. It was before I joined. They kind of ripped up the rule book on how you should build these structures. And, they took the position that if they were out in a remote area trying to build this type of infrastructure, what would be the easiest and most efficient way of doing it with as little labour on the ground as possible.
Yeah,
and this is the solution, and it's absolutely fantastic whenever you see them going in.
Yeah, it sounds like a very good solution.
Oh, so yeah, second to none.
Absolutely.
In terms of engineering, and we're seeing that with the support, in the States from, giants like CMC, that have taken on the product, stateside. So it's got incredible legs to it.
Well, we'll finish up on this topic at the end of the conversation with the 12-month kind of projection. So obviously that's exactly what you do today from a general manager perspective, which is an exciting role. So let's digest and let's go back to what started Richard on a leadership course in, I love the industry, so I'm going to say our industry, trades and engineering industry. So let's go back to your project engineer days at Ringway.
Okay, so I suppose I sort of fell into it by another method. My father had a civil engineering business in Ireland, and I started in it as a general labourer and what have you. I'd been through the military system as well, first time round. Came out of there and went to work for Dad's company in Ireland, decided that sitting on top of a mountain with a shovel in my hand, screaming and yelling at excavator operators while I was in the bottom of the hole wasn't maybe what I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing.
Yeah.
So got out of that, rather fortuitously came across this French chap called Patrice Merlin, who was senior in Eurovia at the time, who owned Ringway. And by pure fortune, my father had always taught me French.
Wow.
Yeah. Just it was just a hobby of his more than anything, and so I could speak fairly well at that point in time.
A
And
hobby
linguist.
speaking French. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
like,
hobby linguist. Yeah.
do you know, like this kind of like learning a different language actually really progresses the brain from an individual neurological. I can't even say it myself.
Neurological. Yeah.
Correct
Yeah.
perspective, and I'm like, there's something about it. So maybe your
Oh,
dad,
there
you know,
is.
hats off to him.
Yeah, no, there is, and there's actually research out there. You know, I read about it. If obviously you look at these things and maybe reflect back a little more, and there's research out there that there's a specific correlation between people who speak multiple languages and a reduced occurrence of things like Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So it's certainly something that fires the synapses in the brain and keeps you triggering. But anyway, I introduced myself in French to him. He was chatting to another fellow in French, and I was covered in bits and pieces of dirt and all the rest, and the boots covered in mud. And he was asking what I was doing, and explained to him the job. And the next thing, I got a phone call and invited over to an interview in the UK with Ringway.
Okay, so we're at Ringway, project engineer. You've spoken, demonstrated to a Frenchman that you can speak multiple languages, including French.
Quite badly, I would note. Personal critique. But look, I ended up over in London, particularly in the south, where I worked predominantly for the head office group. I went around the UK assisting various people construct asphalt plants, quarrying facilities, emulsion facilities, all that type of thing. Pretty heavy engineering work, in all honesty. And because a lot of them were internal projects, you were kind of left to your own devices for much of the time.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked well for me. I came out of there and had another little stint in the army again, and went straight back to them because it was a place I really enjoyed working.
Okay.
By that time, I'd still got a lot of contacts within that business, and ended up looking after, different parts of the business that was split up in geographically and by discipline type. And at that point in time, there was obviously Carillion still around, and a lot of people left to go and work for Carillion at that point in time. They were kind of one of the competitors, which left some of the businesses rather light. And having been there and kind of knowing the ropes, I just assumed more responsibility. I just thought it was, what you did. I didn't really think about it too much at the time, and I was too young to really realise what I'd sort of stepped my foot into. So that kind of got me, not ahead, but I suppose noticed. And I often do reflect on that and think, what was it? Because it certainly wasn't, overwhelming wit and academic ability at that point in time. It comes down to two things. I suppose it comes down to discipline and determination. I really knew what we wanted to do. I listened to people around me, the senior management that were there, and just got on with the job. Whenever something needed to be done that maybe particularly wasn't the nicest of jobs, I quite enjoyed them because they were the difficult parts of the business.
Yep.
I suppose, was there anything, everybody says, is there something that really sort of geared you on or kicked you on in your career? And I don't, at that point in time, I don't think so. It came a little later whenever I discovered the power of mentors and, that influencing factor, particularly on a young man.
Yeah.
With, I suppose, not a lot of support around him personally. Bearing in mind I'd left Ireland, gone over to the UK and what have you. And I suppose that was a real turning point for me, was working that out.
Yeah.
So
I think just going back to your point, which you made about how you got noticed and progressed, it's kind of a common theme with individuals who demonstrate taking on more responsibilities without being asked.
Yeah.
So you put yourself out there to take on these extra responsibilities to learn your trade, basically. And I think that's why you got noticed. Networking helps internally within the company and what you did. But fundamentally, it's just taking them extra responsibilities before you're being asked. And, like, I do feel like there's a lot of people which struggle with this, thinking to themselves, well, I'm being paid X amount, so I should only do these small tasks here.
Yeah, look, that whole job banding thing, I really do struggle with that. I think, the discipline in it and the determination are the two key things. And I always, we have, obviously apprentices, we have, cadets here in the business and things like that. And the one thing, again, one of the things, not the one thing, there's multiple things I say to them, but I think one of the key things is that an individual has to develop their own personal brand. What is it? What is that personal brand that you bring? Because that's what you're selling. Individual, that's what I sell to InQuik, for example. What I sell, used to sell to other businesses and what have you, is my personal brand. My personal brand is discipline, it's consistency, it's determination, and those are the things that drive me. So I look at scenarios that most other people don't want to deal with, and kind of, that's my bag. The old adage of where there's muck, there's money. Well, in business and in a career, things like, restructuring businesses, most people don't like that because it does involve hard conversations. But if you're consistent and you're disciplined, you know the process and you know the route you're taking and where you want to get to, because that's your determining factor, is your ultimate goal.
Absolutely.
Focus on that, what you need to do between point A and Z are a number of moves that you need to make. And
Absolutely.
Just because it wasn't what somebody before you did, you're adding more value by taking that on and doing it. And the more value you can add, the more important you become to any organisation. And therefore, it stands to reason that the more want there will be for you to take a leadership role within that and guide others. You naturally, cream rises to the top naturally whenever you're the one that is seen and doing it consistently. Yeah. Consistently. Doing something once doesn't build a career, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. It's in anything though, like consistency. I'm not going to go too far into this, but think about it from the gym perspective. Like people are always like, I want to have my dream body, but they're not consistent with the diet and not consistent 100%. With going to the gym. And
100%.
It's the same in, I truly believe that in anything, consistency is key. And to be fair, businesses look for consistency, let's be honest.
Totally. I whenever you're employing and you're looking for people, one of the questions you've always got to have in the back of your head, if anybody goes into it and, as a senior leader in an organization that still has owners that, are on the board and ask a question and they set up the business and we're doing some of these jobs that we're employing for.
Yeah.
There's you have to project and educate on the expectation levels that they now have to have of employees.
Absolutely.
It's an owner of a business is always going to be the star employee. That's just a fact. And, it is what it is. So if you've got that consistency level where you know what, that person will operate at, let's say, 70% of the efficiency, not the capability, because everybody's got the same capability. It's just how they apply it. If they operate at 70% of the efficiency of the owner, that's a keeper.
Yeah.
You know? And you go to consistency, and I know everybody uses the gym analogy. My favourite one is, you'll remember this character from football, what the Australians call soccer. But anyway, we'll use the correct terminology.
Football.
Football in the UK is Darryl the Barrel.
Oh,
do you remember him?
Yeah,
he came on, had a 10-minute stint, scored 2 goals, but he never made a career out of it because he couldn't be consistent.
Yeah. I agree.
So, don't be a Darryl the Barrel.
It's to be fair, it's every sport. If I'm honest with you, like you'll always get the one-hit wonders, which we call them. It's how do you produce the outcome consistently is super important. So,
totally.
Just a question, just to close off on your ringwear experience. What do you do you think it was the responsibilities which then progressed your, like, taking the extra responsibilities to get noticed in, let me be honest with you, quite quickly, because it was 2.5 years.
Yep.
And 2.5 years from project engineer to then leading, divisions, is, there's something more than just putting your hand up to get in the muck, as you would say.
Kind of mentioned the military aspect. The key thing there was the discipline that came through. But 100%, that assumption of additional responsibilities would not have happened if I wasn't disciplined. And my personal, I repeat again, that my brand is that discipline, that consistency. I'm not, you got to work to what suits you and what your strengths are. My strengths are not in consoling people whenever they're upset and things like that. I'm not to say I'm cold-hearted, not at all. But, I need to make sure I have people around me who are better at that. I need to have people around me who are more creative than me. We're in, particularly this business I'm in now is very much about innovation and, delivering the next iteration of the product to give better advantages to our clients. Well, we need to make sure we have people who are a lot better at thinking those things up than me.
Yeah.
I'm very good at putting the business where it needs to be and having the right people on those seats at the right point in time and figuring out when that point in time is. But actually those tasks, they're better placed with somebody else.
I love that.
It's understanding your own strengths, and you're not going to be the guru of everything.
Yeah.
But make sure you're the person that understands where those weaknesses are, not somebody else.
I'm going to share this with a general manager of an electrical construction business, which I've just been speaking to regarding this exact conversation. And let's roundabout ways, people he called me and he said, "Tom, I'm wearing multiple hats. You need to find me this role." So this person in this role. And he's saying, I said, "What's your main driver then?" Because I generally break it down. I read a book, The E-Myth Revisited, if you're ever interested, which shows the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. And it sounds like you're the entrepreneur, by the way, Richard. So, technician generally firmly but works in the business, and he likes the technician. Like he likes to work in the business. So I said, always try to remove one hat and bring someone in whose strength is that which is going to complement your, let's just use weaknesses, because it is a weakness, let's be honest.
Totally is.
We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, and I couldn't agree more that it demonstrates that you don't need to be, because if you try to be a jack of all trades, should I say, you're going to be master of none. So,
totally.
now that's awesome. Okay, totally. So Ringway, you was there nearly eight and a half years. You moved companies. So what was I want to get these just reasons why you moved companies as well, because it's in the trades and engineering industry. People these days are moving for an extra remuneration, a promotion. Well, not just promotions, but more like on the remuneration scale. So what's the reasoning for you moving companies?
Well, if Ringway laterally became Eurovia, and I kept moving, as you say, up through the ranks of that, from sort of divisional, regional, up to sort of that senior executive level. Quite honestly, I left then for a couple of years out of the industry and again back into military service. Came back out of there, rejoined Eurovia, again back into an executive role. And I know that sounds very odd, dropped in, dropped out. It's not particularly how it happened, but it's how it transpired.
Yeah.
I came back to Eurovia with a very clear idea in my mind that in the next 3 years, I wanted to emigrate to Australia.
Okay.
That was more for my own internal peace and sort of some more mature decisions that I was making at that time of where I wanted my children to grow up and, you know, what have you. So, you know, that there, I would say to everybody, you know, or people that are looking at it, you know, keep your goals fixed, but your plan flexible.
Yeah.
You know, so that you can change out when you need to. So anyway, back to the question. Up through Eurovia, and then FM Conway approached me about a position with them as a director. So I spent a lot of time mulling that over, because for years Eurovia and Ringway had been exceptionally good for me. Anybody that grows up with a company will understand you become part of the furniture. You know, you become one of the major solution providers for everybody coming in. I'd grown up with the business from sort of 150 million turnover to, you know, 750 million. Wow. So yeah, you know, so coming up through that, you kind of knew every nook and cranny of the business. You knew who was doing what and who the real effectors of change were. You know, who do I need to talk to about this? Oh, best person's maybe not the person on the organogram, but here's the person that will actually do it. And you know, that lends itself very, very well to progression, because all of a sudden, again, you're not the person that knows how to do it, but you know how to get it done. So yeah, it took a lot of time for me to make that move, and it was always with the intent that at some point we would move to Australia and emigrate. So took that for a couple of years, did what I needed to do personally. Very clear that it was only well, from my perspective, very, very clear that it was only a short term, 2 years, and then I would be leaving. So that worked for everybody. I got I would say, heightened responsibility of their board experience, which anybody that's been in the industry and knew it back then was an education in itself. Loved it. Great company. Can't, you know, the legacy that Michael's left behind there is fantastic. You know, and it was a sad day whenever Michael passed on, but you know, this is life, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the sole kind of two reasons why. One, that real senior board level position or board level exposure, and the decision to emigrate. And now, again, that was very personal.
Was Australia always top of the list, or?
It was, but I did get a wobbler on the way in, so to speak. A friend of mine, not a friend, a colleague I'd worked with from a large equipment manufacturer, as I was saying to him that I was, you know, a few months away from emigrating to Australia, give me a call and, you know, you should have told me, you know, an opportunity for you in Singapore. Here's the package. And I had to sit there and scratch my head looking at the health benefits, the paid nanny, the private schooling, and the housing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I spoke to quite a few people, and, you know, it came down to a couple of factors, really. One was we were looking for that longer term move, not just the quick dollar. Second of all, to go to Singapore and live there and enjoy it is probably a younger man's game at that point in time. Bear in mind, it was only in the late 30s at that point, or
I was going to say,
mid-30s.
you were still a young rooster, mate.
Yeah, I like to think so. But I was in my mid-30s, and I think if you're going there, it's ideal around your mid-late 20s, you know, before kids sort of thing.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I just want to touch on the point which you just made there and make it very clear as well, because a lot of people think short-term rather than long-term. Short-term gains is not going to sustain your career ambitions, right?
No.
Not just career, but also life ambitions, because it sounds like I've just done an episode on this, which is like the chapters of an engineer, basically. And it sounds like you was at where your personal life met your business life.
Yeah, totally.
And it's generally when you start either looking into having a kid or having kids, etc. And that's probably you've got to think to yourself, what is the long-term vision and which is going to sustain my family as well?
Exactly. And I always tell people, one of your legacies that as a leader, and I hate that term because, I think it's true, you are, whether you like it or not, and I love it. But one of the major things I really aim to do in that, and it lends itself to being a longer term goal, is developing people. If you can invest into people and develop them, and you always hear, in books and things, train everybody up to take your job. Well, it's absolutely true. It is absolutely true. If you're able to create more people who are able to do your job, it makes your job so much easier and allows for your transition into other areas where, guess what, you'll probably enjoy more. And that's always the thing I kind of look for. And that doesn't happen overnight. You really got to have that 2, 3, 4 year plan. Where do I want to be? What is it I actually want to do? Because if let's say you're a project engineer sitting on, some site in Sydney, and you think to yourself, am I going to be here for the next 10 years, battling with subbies, arguing with the client, X, Y, and Z going on, filling in health and safety forms, which, we'll totally need it. Let's call it the administration, carrying on the administration of this job, which is never ending. And if I'm lucky, it'll break even. That can't be what you want to do. So how can you make that better? Well, the only way of making that better is to bring along those people that are all working with you on your journey. That journey has to be longer than the end of that one job.
Yeah.
So that's effectively it. Whenever I was sitting in Ringway, it wasn't, building this quarry, is what I want to finish. That's just the stepping stone along to the end of the garden, really.
Yeah. It's interesting that, because listen, from a project engineer in Australia, you can go work for the tier 1 mobs, and
totally
work on a job site with 80 engineers, etc., and just stick in your certain part of the project and earn the big bucks, no problem. If you want to be a project or contract project engineer, and that's your long-term goal, that's fine. But like what you were saying, Richard, make sure you have that in mind, because it comes up to the specialisation part in your career where you need to decide where you want your career. And it actually happens just after the graduation perspective, in my opinion. So if you look at, say, a graduate engineer and they've progressed into, say, a site engineer, and then they've just broke out into the project engineer, and they've specialised in, say, water infrastructure and utilities, that is what you're going to be known for your majority of your career. And it's very hard to pivot when you get down the track, if I'm honest with you.
Totally.
You can do, but it's very, very difficult because you'll have to go for a junior position, and the junior position is not going to pay you the specialised position rates.
That's it. And that, I go back to, what was spoke about earlier, I never really, and it's not because I had heaps. Whenever I moved to London after the army with, 2 bags and £150 in my pocket. So but even with that, the salary I was on or the pay I got was never the deciding factor. The deciding factor for me was, is it part of where I want to get to? Or is it is it the pole vault or is it the high jump? How high is it? And sometimes you have to, one thing I did do fairly early on was refused a role.
Okay.
Because I thought, you know what, I'm just not quite ready for that move yet. And it was probably the best decision I ever made because I got to stay where I was in something I really enjoyed for an extra 6 months. And whenever, probably not the same level of role come up, but another role came up that progressed me to where I wanted to be in terms of the type of work I was doing, I took it, and it was, longer term, much better strategy.
Yeah. And it's them key points in your career which will determine your career. So, and the direction.
Yeah, I think that those key points, there's certainly inflection points that I would say are. But as I mentioned earlier, I think for me, kind of the key sort of assistance in that were the people that were advising me as well. You got to have those coaches around you. You got to have people that you trust. And that's a huge thing. You've got to have people that you can trust around you, that you can bounce those ideas off and, help with those decisions. Because you're the CEO of you. That's the bottom line. What your turnover in your PLC is completely determinant upon you.
Yeah.
But the moral, ethical, and sort of self-gratification of your work is completely down to you, what you choose to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dollars will come if you actually are good at what you do. If you're just bluffing, well, you're going to get found out at some point.
Correct.
So you are, and then the house of cards comes down, and not only do you lose the ability to kind of, probably not totally as extreme as this, the ability to earn, or earn that potential again, but you lose the reputational damage is horrendous. So if you protect your reputation first and foremost, build your brand, protect your reputation, do all the good things, do all the right things. Don't have to be the best things, but do all the right things and have a strategy and a direction that you follow, and a bit of flexibility built in. You're most of the part there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's a very good point. I've actually noted that down, to be fair. So, okay, let's finish your career with the now 2 GM position. So let's start with Roadworks Group, where you was there for nearly 3 years. Talk to us about that and your involvement there.
Roadworks was always whenever I moved here, we emigrated, I kind of knew the owner of that business through an acquisition that Eurovia looked into in the UK. So I'd come across the chap that owns it there whenever he was working for Downer here. So he left Downer and set up his own and what have you. But that was a really interesting role, massively diverse business in terms of its product offerings and sales lines and things like that. But there's an education in itself. Not every job you go to and every employer is going to fit with you. Sometimes you don't get a position because you don't fit with them. You got to look at it from the inverse perspective, and really think, do they fit with me?
It's a two-way street, isn't it?
Totally.
It's not just a one-way street, and people get it wrong. People get it wrong there.
Yeah, and look, I I enjoyed my time there. It was a difficult business to be in. The roadworks market in New South Wales is particularly saturated, especially from an asphalt production point of view. It's a very different environment to UK. At the time, whenever I came here, you had these SRAP contracts, Sydney Asset Maintenance Programs, and it was something that kind of tied up a lot of the previous Transport for New South Wales relationships and a lot of their commercials into third-party providers. And that caused a lot of tension in the market, particularly in the Sydney area. And it caused roadworks, really, without giving away too much, to have to rethink the business.
Sure.
And a business that size naturally takes a little bit of time to adjust. And I think that was probably the hardest part of my career to date, was navigating that. Look, we navigated it. We bought additional businesses, integrated them in. We moved facilities. We finished an asphalt plant in Wollongong. It set the business up. Yeah, it was certainly something that was, let's put it like that, not one that I would probably want to talk too long about.
That's okay. Okay, so you've had the difficult situation at Roadworks. You've done it, so you've obviously a lot more resilient individual there.
Mm.
And then our good friends at Breffni come along. Do I pronounce that? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, you
Breffni.
did.
Breffni.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Breffni. Yeah.
Talk to us about that. So GM of operations. Talk to us about that.
So that started off as GM operations. So again, I kind of knew the owner, the managing director of that business, just through business I'd done with him between Roadworks and us. We had a large job, and we subcontracted Breffni in. So whenever I sort of decided, right, I've done what I need to do at Roadworks, looking for something that I can not relax into, but is more in my not in my wheelhouse, more at this point in my life, what do I want to focus on?
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was progressing further. Tom approached me and we had a discussion about a role with them, and that was GM operations. And that was to go in and look after a couple of different areas within that business. We had contracts down in Wollongong. We had, a large business that needed to be managed. We had a transport business. There was all sorts of internal resourcing. There was, a labour hire business in amongst there. There was, figuring out the arms and legs of how you could string this together to get some form of integration within those different revenue streams, business streams, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting, and I really, really enjoyed my time there. Great bunch of people, and again, that's something you've got to have around you, is a great bunch of people. I think the business had been set up really well in terms of what the MD was aiming off at. And again, it's same as myself, very long-term view on what he wanted to do. He'd invested in things at the right point in time.
Yep.
Yeah, we always had our disagreements of getting rid of certain things and buying in certain, but that's the job of an MD and a GM, to butt heads like that. That's the whole point of it.
100%. It's healthy, and the best thing which you've said about that. Now, a big thing for me is when I speak to senior leaders, business owners, etc. Say, for example, if they're having issues, I don't know why I'm a recruitment consultant. I should be a business consultant, but I always say that you should have the correct systems in place. Your company needs to be running seamlessly. Each employee should know what they exactly need to do, and it should all sing off the same hymn sheet. So if yourself implemented that into Breffney across multiple divisions, and you actually tied the knot basically between all divisions. That's the super important part, right?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, look, from my point of view, it was incredibly simple. You know, we have these resources, we put them out, and we fulfill the contract, and we get paid. Now, obviously, you know, you get claims and certificates, and you know the normal financial cycle to go through. But it was, you know, the CFO there was you know, exceptionally good. You know, I can't take all the credit for figuring out the arms and legs of the thing. You know, he kind of, you know, was forefront of doing that, so that I had a clear road to actually get those resources to a point of making them effective. That's the differentiation of a GM and a successful and competent financial advice that you get within a business. And if you're a GM, and once you get to a senior level, whether anybody likes this or not, the numbers are facts. Your feelings aren't. You know, so your gut instinct, unfortunately, takes second place to the facts. So again, bit of advice: understand how to read financial documents. You know, understand what your project P&L is. Understand where your margins are. Understand where you're leaking. Understand the effect of time on projects. Understand the effect of time on a business. You know, labour, just because you are paying it, whether it's on the site or not, or on the job or not, it's actually costing you double if it's not put to effect.
Yeah.
You know,
is that from a productivity scale, would you say, or is that from a different scale?
Well, from an operations point of view, you know, you take it, you know, if you've got a resource that's there and it's costing you money, well, if it's sat idle or unproductive at that point in time, you're paying for that. Whereas if it was on an efficient role or being put to effect, well, that is now an asset. Whereas, so the delta between the liability and the asset is double what you would ever pay for it.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so absolutely.
You know, it's a very simple concept, and people think, you know, I've got, you know, I can afford for them to stand for a day while we do this. Well, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
Because now it's just cost you double. Whatever you think, it's double.
Yeah.
And if everybody walked into it that way, as you say, the construction industry would be in a lot better shape right now. So
it's collaboration, if I'm honest with you. Like, look at it from a bird's eye view. If you got every contractor to collaborate instead of, you know, the head contractors, their job, unfortunately, is to try and get the subcontractors down so they can meet budget. And it's just kind of a toxic kind of situation, isn't it? So it just needs all it requires, and it's something which human beings, we have it embedded into us, is collaboration throughout, being transparent and making sure that the margins are there. So then I'm not saying someone can afford a Ferrari in the industry. I'm talking about someone can earn a decent living, pay the workers, which are then basically increasing the country's revenue. Everybody wins, but they don't do it because it's everyone wanting that Ferrari in the garage, isn't it? So,
look, there's certainly, I would say, an element of that within the industry. I think there's far deeper rooted issues within the construction industry here in Australia than that. Not to say that it's a basket case, not at all. I think it's, look, at the end of the day, if we go into, you know, a financial slowdown, the easiest way out of it is to spend on infrastructure and construction. Why? Because it's the best bang for buck. That tells you that it's probably one of the most efficient fiscal vehicles that the government have. That's caused by the good effect of people and planning. Yeah. You know, so it's not a basket case at all.
I agree.
It's a very effective financial tool that you know, can turn economies, particularly here in New South Wales.
And this rabbit hole, so
totally. And don't even get me started on the latest news.
So, Let's go to a bit of the question round which I've got for you, Richard. So we've touched briefly on it, but let's just spend just a little bit of time on what advice would you give someone who's got a similar background to yourself, project engineer, etc., moved up into general manager, found his niche. What advice would you give them to obviously grow their career?
Yeah, look longer term. It's not about the dollar. It's really, really not. Find something that you are that you naturally gravitate to. What is your natural position on things? I mean, mine is not. I trade on a disciplined approach to things. You know, this is how we're setting our stall out from the very beginning, and here's the rules that I would like everybody to work within.
Yeah.
Flexibility in how we get there, because everybody's different and the way they'll maneuver an issue is going to be different to the way I do. So forget about micromanaging. You know, as long as the final intent is clear and the bookends in terms of what is acceptable are very, very clear, you can move a whole team forward a lot more smoothly than you can by screaming, shouting, whipping people into positions and things like that. And ultimately, all you'll do is drive people away. So look for the longer term goal.
Yeah.
Don't think that dollars are what you define your career by. You define your career by how many people you bring along on that journey. And for me, the foremost thing I would advise anybody is understand and develop your own branding. You know, what is it you bring to the party? What is your strength? You know, how can you develop? Because it could only be one thing. I mean, you know, situations where I can say, right, this is the way out of it. This is the route out of it. How do I navigate in that? Here's the problem, solution. Here's our 5-step plan to get out, and here's who we need to do. Here's what you guys need to do to assist me in moving us all forward.
So it's clear and concise, isn't it?
Exactly. Clear, concise, defining your own brand first and foremost. You know, are you an empathetic person that you want to, you know, nurse people along? And that's fine. That's fine. Then looking for a senior role that involves that is very different to a senior role that involves discipline or involves highly innovative or, you know, creative roles. You know, they're all different mindsets, you know, that you really have to take into consideration what your natural gravitation is.
Okay, and what does the next 12 months look like for Richard then? I know that we started on this one as well briefly, but let's just take a bit of time to digress. So what's the next 12 months looking like for yourself and InQuik?
Okay, our next 12 months are extremely exciting. We're just signed quite a large deal here in Australia with a government agency. We are expanding further into New Zealand, so we'll be looking further into that market. For me, that's where I really enjoy is that growth. For me, my main role will be finding the people that are going to facilitate that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sitting looking, right, okay, New Zealand, PNG, all these different areas that we are looking at, you know, what do we actually need in terms of resource, you know, in terms of support for people to go and develop those markets with us, you know. And it's not just, you know, sort of your widget salesperson that we would be looking for. You know, it's, do they have an engineering background? Do they have a construction background? What type of personality are they? You know, we understand our clients, but we look for more than just understanding the ultimate client, because there's you know, lots of stakeholders and in between that we want to make sure come along on that journey with us. And I think where a project engineer has a real advantage over others from coming through, you know, a sort of a, you know, a project system to a, you know, a business system to into management, and through those sort of set phases of a career, is that you understand the impact it has at a site level. You understand the impact it has at a resource level. You understand then, once you're in the senior level, that, hold on, that's got a real business impact. We don't want the people who are constructing our bridges on site to have issues. So we make it very, very simple. We make sure that the people that they're in contact with have the technical capability and understanding that, will support them. So, there's a lot of factors, but again, that there's the problem, and, it's figuring out that clear route to getting to that solution.
Sure. Sounds good. Well, because you're the first guest of our new question round, we're going to ask you this one off air to leave it for the next one. Okay. The next guest, should I say? But I'm probably going to ask yourself a question right now.
Yeah, go for
it. With a strong background like you've got, it sounds like you've been in quite a few industries. How does one demonstrate and pivot into different industries while maintaining a leadership position?
Horrible question to ask somebody on the hop. On the fly.
It's a big thing, which is...
It is. And it's something I think a lot of people struggle with. What I would tend to say is this, that at a level, most businesses are actually incredibly similar. Businesses fundamentally have a number of issues that you solve. It's either people, systems, processes, or clients. Funding comes from clients, and those are things that come later as you delve into a business. But initially, a business will recruit for one of those 4 reasons. Now, if you can navigate those and maintain discipline with your people, you can maintain, a sense of communication with your clients, and you maintain a bit of determination within the processes and the systems that the business has, you're always going to be driving betterment in them. And that's what you're selling, is the betterment of the business. Now, it doesn't matter in my mind, and people need to get over that from their own minds, what sector the business is in. Because, you've got, civil engineers, openly go from, utilities to, contracting. From the layman's perspective, they're 2 completely separate entities and businesses and markets, but they're similar problems. You're just looking. I think people get caught up in the branding of the business more than the problems that all those businesses share. Okay. And for me, it's just maintaining that. Hold on, this is the same problem that I dealt with here, and here's how we do it.
It's in how to do it is a big thing.
Exactly, and it's that discipline and that, awareness of your own brand, of what you're actually good at. And again, the fit. Does the business fit with you, and do you fit with that business?
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, Richard. I much appreciate it.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Perfect.